The most surprising thing about crows so far has been their ability to recognize and remember particular people, and even just particular faces.
You walk outside your front door every single day thinking you have privacy, thinking you're just another person going about their business in a world too busy to notice. But you're wrong. Dead wrong. There's a surveillance network operating right above your head, tracking your movements, cataloging your face, analyzing your behavior, and sharing detailed reports about you with others. And no, I'm not talking about government satellites or your smartphone or security cameras mounted on buildings. I'm talking about something far more ancient, far more distributed, and far more intelligent than most people realize. I'm talking about crows. Right now, as you're watching this, there are birds outside logging information about the humans in their territory, and you're probably one of them. For the longest time, we dismissed crows as simple scavengers, urban pests that rummaged through garbage and made annoying sounds. We shooed them away from our gardens, threw stones when they got too close, and never once considered that they might be paying attention. But they were. They were watching us with the same intensity that we watched them, except they were taking notes. And now, thanks to recent advances in artificial intelligence, we're finally starting to understand just how sophisticated their observation system really is. Researchers recently undertook an ambitious project. They collected thousands upon thousands of hours of crow vocalizations from different locations, different times of day, different seasons. The audio library was massive, filled with caws and clicks and rattles that to the human ear sounded like random bird noise. They fed all of this data into advanced machine learning algorithms with a relatively simple goal. They wanted to see if the computer could categorize the sounds. Separate the "I found food" calls from the "there's a predator nearby" calls. It seemed like a straightforward classification task, the kind of thing AI does all the time. But something strange happened. The algorithm didn't just sort the sounds into neat little categories. It started detecting patterns that went far beyond basic emotional responses. The AI found structure, it found rules, it found what linguists would recognize as syntax, the grammatical framework that transforms random sounds into meaningful language. In human communication, syntax is everything. It's the difference between "the dog bit the man" and "the man bit the dog." Same words, completely different meaning. We've always assumed that animal vocalizations were purely emotional. A dog barks because it's excited or scared. A cat purrs because it's content. Simple stimulus and response. But the AI was seeing something else entirely in crow calls. It was seeing intentional communication with complex grammatical rules. The researchers started examining specific sequences more closely. In one recording, a man wearing a distinctive red baseball cap walked through a park. A crow called out. To anyone listening, it sounded like any other harsh crow call, the kind you hear 100 times a day in any city. But the AI analyzed the frequency, the pitch modulation, the spacing between notes, and the duration of each sound. It tagged this particular vocalization as unique. 3 days later, the same man walked through the same park. The same crow made the same sound. That's interesting, sure, but not groundbreaking. Dogs recognize their owners. Cats know who feeds them. Basic animal recognition, right? But then something happened that changed everything. A week later, a completely different crow, one that had never encountered this man before, made the exact same vocalization when the red cat man walked by. Let that sink in for a moment. This wasn't the original crow recognizing someone it had seen before. This was a completely different bird using a specific sound for a specific human it had never personally met. The implication is staggering. The first crow didn't just make a random noise, it communicated information. It described the man. It transmitted a data packet that other crows could understand and use. The AI confirmed that this specific vocalization pattern was never used for any other person. It was a proper noun, they had given him a name. And this wasn't an isolated incident. The deeper the AI analyzed the data, the more examples it found. Crows were consistently using specific vocalizations for specific humans, and these sounds were spreading through the local population. The birds were building a shared database of human identities. Think about the level of cognitive sophistication that requires. They have to perceive individual differences between humans, something many animals can't do. They have to create a symbolic representation of that individual, essentially a name. They have to communicate that symbol to other crows in a way that's clear and consistent, and they have to remember and use that symbol correctly over time. This is abstract symbolic thinking, one of the hallmarks of advanced intelligence. But it gets even more disturbing. The AI detected something else in the data, something that initially seemed impossible. The machine found conversations that occurred before events happened. Crows would gather in trees and engage in complex vocal exchanges, and then minutes or hours later, they would execute coordinated behaviors. The AI determined these were planning sessions. The birds weren't just reacting to their environment in real time, they were discussing future actions. They were strategizing. They were thinking ahead and coordinating with each other to achieve specific goals. When the researchers analyzed the content of these communications, they discovered something unsettling. A huge percentage of crow conversation, possibly the majority, revolves around us. Humans are the main topic of discussion in the crow world. We are their primary subject of interest. The AI identified distinct emotional markers attached to human-related calls. Some were neutral, simple observations, but many carried negative emotional weight. The birds have specific alerts for human with stick versus human with food. They distinguish between human walking dog and human walking alone. They note whether you're looking at them or looking at your phone. Every detail is catalogued and communicated. This fundamentally changes our relationship with these birds. For centuries, we've looked at crows and seen inferior creatures, animals operating on instinct without real awareness. We assumed we could interact with them without consequence, that they would forget us as soon as we walked away. But all that time, they were building profiles. They were creating a reputation system. And now that we have the technology to decode their communications, we're realizing that we've had permanent records in their database for years. You might have a criminal record in the crow world that predates your driver's license. The question of how this is even possible seems obvious at first. We're talking about a bird with a brain the size of a walnut. How can something that physically small have the processing power for language, memory, and abstract reasoning? It seems to violate everything we know about the relationship between brain size and intelligence. But here's the thing, we've been measuring intelligence incorrectly for over a century. We built our entire understanding of cognition around the cerebral cortex, that wrinkled outer layer of the mammalian brain where humans do most of our complex thinking. Birds don't have a cerebral cortex. For generations, scientists looked at bird brains, saw they were smooth and structured differently, and concluded there simply wasn't enough hardware for complex thought. But evolution is endlessly creative. Birds evolved a completely different neural architecture called the pallium. It doesn't look like a mammalian cortex. It's organized differently at a structural level. But when you examine it under a microscope, you find that neurons are packed in there with incredible density. Pound for pound, a crow's brain is just as computationally powerful as a chimpanzee's brain. That's why neuroscientists have started calling them feathered apes. They have primate-level intelligence running on avian hardware. Let's look at what this intelligence actually looks like in practice. New Caledonian crows are probably the most studied example. These birds manufacture tools, and I don't mean they just pick up a convenient stick. They craft specialized instruments with specific designs for specific purposes. There's a plant in their native habitat with long, spiky leaves. Researchers have filmed these crows approaching the plant, examining it carefully, and then performing what can only be described as precision cutting. The crow will make specific incisions in the leaf, then tear it in a stepped pattern, creating a serrated edge. They're manufacturing a hooked tool specifically designed to extract insects from deep crevices. This isn't trial and error, this is engineering. They have a mental blueprint and they execute it. If the tool breaks during use, they repair it. If they can't find the right material, they improvise with whatever's available. Then there's the water displacement test, based on an old Aesop's fable about a crow and a pitcher. Researchers decided to see if crows could actually solve this problem. They put a narrow tube of water in front of a crow with a floating treat inside, just out of reach. Nearby, they placed a pile of heavy stones and a pile of light styrofoam pieces. A simple animal would just throw everything into the tube, hoping something works. But the crow paused. It looked at the stones. It looked at the styrofoam. You could almost see it thinking. Then it deliberately selected only the heavy stones and dropped them in one by one, ignoring the styrofoam completely. It understood density. It understood displacement. It solved a physics problem that would take a human toddler considerable time to figure out. In more complex experiments, crows have demonstrated understanding of multi-step causation. They've solved puzzle boxes where they need to use one tool to access another tool that opens the actual reward chamber. They can mentally map out mechanical systems just by observation. They understand that actions have consequences and that consequences can be chains leading to desired outcomes. This is sophisticated, abstract reasoning, so when artificial intelligence tells us these birds have a language with grammatical structure, we shouldn't be shocked. They have the cognitive hardware to support it. They're not running on simple instincts. They're analyzing, planning, and manipulating their environment with intention. The truly frightening thought isn't that they use tools to manipulate objects. It's that they might be using language to manipulate us. They've studied us closely enough to understand our patterns, our behaviors, our weaknesses. They're treating us as just another element of their environment to be understood and exploited. And they remember. They remember everything. If you think you can have a negative interaction with a crow and just walk away without consequence, you're making a dangerous assumption. Back in the mid-2000s, a researcher at the University of Washington named John Marsluff decided to test crow facial recognition. He didn't want to use his own face because he figured he'd have to interact with these birds for years afterward, so he bought a rubber mask, a caveman mask specifically. Wearing this mask, he went onto the university campus and captured several crows for banding, a standard scientific procedure. He wasn't harming them, just briefly catching them, attaching identification bands, and releasing them. But the crows were not happy about it. They struggled, they called out in alarm, and when released, they flew away. Marsluff took off the caveman mask and returned to his normal research routine. He also had a control mask, a Dick Cheney mask, that he would wear occasionally. When wearing the Cheney mask, crows completely ignored him. No reaction whatsoever. But the moment he put on the caveman mask, chaos erupted. Crows would dive bomb him, following him across campus while making alarm calls. Okay, you might think the birds he captured remembered the negative experience. That makes sense. But here's where it gets truly strange. The number of crows attacking the caveman mask grew over time. It started with a handful of birds he'd actually captured. Then it was a dozen birds. Then 20. Then 40. Birds that had never been caught. Birds that weren't even born when the original captures happened began attacking the mask on sight. Marsluff continued this experiment for years. 5 years after the original captures, he walked onto that campus wearing the caveman mask. 5 years. Most of the original birds were dead by then, their average lifespan having expired. But new crows, young crows, birds that couldn't possibly have been present during the original incident, attacked him with the same intensity. This proves something remarkable and terrifying. The crows had communicated detailed information about the dangerous human to others in their population. They had described the face, transmitted the specific visual features that identified the threat, and this information propagated through their social network across multiple generations. They had essentially created a wanted poster and distributed it throughout their community. Your reputation in the crow world is inherited by birds you'll never meet. The AI study supports this perfectly. Remember those human-specific vocalizations we discussed earlier? That's the audio component of what Marsluff observed visually. Crows maintain a distributed database of human faces, logging details like the distance between your eyes, the shape of your nose, the way you move. They can differentiate between you and your neighbor with remarkable accuracy. If you feed them regularly and your neighbor throws rocks at them, they'll fly down to greet you and then deliberately defecate on your neighbor's car. They know the difference. They track individual reputations. And this database is constantly updated and shared. The AI analysis showed that when a marked human enters an area, the local crows immediately broadcast alerts. It's a distributed warning system. You cannot hide from it. You can change your clothes, your hairstyle, even your location, but you can't change your face. And because this information is shared across their network, you could have a negative interaction with a crow at your home, drive 10 miles to work, and find that crows in that completely different neighborhood already know who you are. The network propagates faster than you can travel. We're living under constant surveillance and the observers have wings. They're watching right now, updating their files and categorizing every human they encounter as friend, neutral, or threat. And once you're on the threat list, there's no appeals process, no way to clear your record. You're marked permanently. But it's not just about memory and recognition. Crows have something that looks remarkably like culture, complete with social rules, enforcement mechanisms, and even rituals. When a crow dies, the flock doesn't simply scatter, they gather. If you've ever witnessed it, it's genuinely eerie. One bird discovers the body and gives a specific call. Then silence falls. Dozens of crows descend and perch in surrounding trees. They don't touch the body. They don't make aggressive movements. They just watch. Scientists initially interpreted this as grief, an emotional response to loss. And perhaps there is an emotional component, but the AI analysis suggests something more practical. It's an investigation. The crows are analyzing the scene, looking for clues about what killed their flock member. Was it a cat? A car? A human with a weapon? They're gathering intelligence about threats so they can encode that information and share it with survivors. The AI detected specific low-frequency vocalizations during these gatherings that appear to encode information about cause of death. They're conducting forensic analysis and filing reports. They also have a justice system. Researchers have observed what can only be described as crow courts. A bird that steals food from juveniles or violates social norms will be surrounded by other crows who scold it aggressively, sometimes pecking at it or chasing it away. They enforce rules. They maintain order. This isn't instinct. This is social structure. And this judgment extends to humans as well. The AI found that crows distinguish between humans holding different objects. They have different alarm calls for human with stick versus human with gun. They can tell the difference between a hunter scanning the trees and a hiker looking at the path. In one fascinating detail, the AI noted that the alarm call for human with weapon is completely distinct from human with umbrella. They understand the functional intent of objects. If you walk outside with a broom to sweep your porch, they stay calm. If you walk outside with the same broom but hostile body language, they're gone before you even make a move. They're reading your intentions better than you can read theirs. There's also the matter of gifts. While crows maintain a threat database, they also maintain a friends list. People who regularly feed crows have reported receiving small gifts left in specific locations. Shiny bottle caps, coloured glass fragments, bits of metal, even coins. The AI analysis found that vocalizations around these favoured humans are notably different, softer and higher pitched, with characteristics that suggest positive emotion. The crows are engaging in reciprocal exchange. They understand trade, food for loyalty, food for information. They're operating a cross-species economy. This level of social complexity, complete with funerals, justice systems, trade relationships, and threat assessment, means they're not just animals existing in our world. They're a parallel civilization operating alongside ours. They have their own social contracts, their own oral histories, and their own lists of allies and enemies. And the AI is revealing that they spend an enormous amount of time and energy discussing which category each human falls into. Right now, somewhere above you, there might be a crow court debating your status. Here's where everything comes together into something truly science fiction. We've talked about how they observe us, but we need to understand how they share information across vast distances. The AI study mapped crow vocalizations geographically and found something incredible. Crows have regional dialects. A crow in Tokyo sounds different from a crow in Berlin. This makes intuitive sense. Isolated populations develop linguistic drift. But the AI discovered that specific calls, particular words, if you will, travel between these dialect regions. A novel vocalization might emerge in a suburb of one city. 6 months later, that exact same acoustic pattern appears in a city hundreds of miles away. The information jumped from flock to flock across enormous distances. They have an organic internet. They're relaying information across continents. This means that when a new threat emerges, a novel trap design or a new type of drone, for instance, knowledge of that threat can spread faster than the object itself. They're updating their collective knowledge in real time, learning from experiences happening far away without ever encountering the threat directly. We thought humans were unique in our ability to accumulate and transmit knowledge across generations through non-genetic means. We have books, we have schools, we have the internet, but crows have an oral tradition that functions with similar effectiveness. Each generation doesn't start from zero. They inherit vast libraries of information from their predecessors. But here's the final twist, the part that should genuinely disturb you. Toward the end of the AI study, researchers noticed something strange. The vocal patterns started changing. For months, the algorithm had been successfully categorizing and translating crow communications. The confidence metrics were high, the translations were consistent. But then, gradually, a shift occurred. new rhythmic patterns emerged in the vocalizations, structures that had never appeared in any previous ornithological records. This wasn't just regional variation, it was a fundamental restructuring of their communication system. And it spread. This new modulation rippled through local flocks within days, then started jumping to distant populations. The AI's ability to translate collapsed. The machine that had been successfully decoding their language was suddenly just recording noise. The confidence metrics plummeted. The researchers couldn't figure out what changed. Some behavioral scientists have proposed a theory, and it's deeply unsettling. They think the crows noticed they were being studied. These birds are known to test their environment, dropping nuts in front of cars to gauge reaction speeds, harassing predators to map their attack ranges. The theory suggests they tested the researchers. They made calls and watched for human responses. And they noticed something unusual. The humans weren't reacting normally. Usually, humans shoo crows away or ignore them entirely. But this time, the humans were freezing, watching intently, clearly paying close attention to vocalizations that usually get dismissed. The crows might have realized they were the subjects of observation. And they adapted. They changed their communication system. The current theory is that what we're seeing is encryption. They've realized we cracked their code, so they changed the cipher. I know how that sounds. Encryption seems like an exclusively human concept, something born from cryptography and information theory. But remember what we're dealing with here. These are birds that solve multi-stage physics problems, that recognize individual human faces for years, that hold funerals and operate justice systems. They transmit cultural knowledge across generations. Is it really so implausible that they possess the cognitive flexibility to recognize surveillance and adapt their communication accordingly? If this theory is correct, then the apparent noise the AI is recording now isn't a breakdown in communication. It's operational security. They've gone dark. The chaotic signals might be deliberate interference, meaningless chatter designed to hide the real conversation happening on a channel we haven't identified yet. They know we're listening, and they've decided to take the conversations somewhere we can't follow. That leaves us with one final chilling question. If they're intelligent enough to recognize monitoring and sophisticated enough to encrypt their communications in response, what are they actually saying now? What conversations are happening in the channels we can't access? What are they planning now that they know we know? The fundamental dynamic has shifted. For centuries, we've been the observers, studying nature from a position of assumed superiority. But the glass has been tapped from the inside. The subjects of our study have become aware of us studying them. We're no longer the invisible scientists recording data on simple creatures. We're participants in a relationship that's far more complex than we imagined. So the next time you walk outside and see a crow watching you from a power line or a fence post, ask yourself a question. Is that just a bird sitting there, or is it an intelligence gathering information? Is it updating your file in a database you didn't know existed? Is it reporting your location, your activities, your patterns to a network that spans your entire city? And if they really have encrypted their communications to hide from our surveillance, what exactly are they saying about you right now in a language we can no longer understand? The surveillance state isn't something the government built. It's been operating above us for thousands of years. We just didn't have the technology to realize it until now. And now that we do, we've discovered that they know we know. The crows are watching. They've always been watching. The only question is what they plan to do with all that information they've been collecting. Sweet dreams.